Hello and welcome. We will get to the content of this Zoom meeting in just a few minutes. As a reminder, these are recorded events. So you will see the record light go on for the presentation part of, sorry about that guys, the presentation part of the meeting, and then when we go to Q&A, we stop recording. But just so that you're all aware. And then for those of you guys who don't know me, I'm Ann Massoni, and on behalf of the Society for Photographic Education, who is hosting this event, welcome. SPE is a member-based organization for those who aren't familiar, and I'll be dropping our website in the chat window momentarily. A few protocols and one that's new this week. As an attendance taking mechanism, please do put your name and email address in the chat window. It can go to either myself and or SPE so that we can share with you any updates directly in addition to our social media posts. We've started you all out on mute, and we ask that you stay in mute through to our presenters ending their portion of the meeting. We'll open the meeting up to the larger audience once they've completed their presentation. So again, just stay in mute until then. Once we wrap up our presentations, we'll stick around so that we can have an informal conversation. We ask that you present your questions into the chat feature regardless of whether or not you also speak, because it helps us facilitate the conversation and it also helps us build out content on the FotoFika website. This week we are going to try something a little different with that chat. So again, attendance can go to SPE or to me, doesn't matter. But when we get to the Q&A, we'll ask that you send that content directly to me and let us know how this goes. It was something that we wanted to try out this week, and we'll see if it's a good move or a bad move. And as I've been saying every week, we are establishing a way forward in this shifting time, and we can certainly do that together. So thanks for being here. And Betsy, on to you.
All right. So I'm going to start by congratulating Anne, who has been, it's been recently announced that she was named Dean and Managing Director of Education for the International Center for Photography. Is it for of photography? Okay, so congratulations, Anne. We're proud, and she promises she's going to be a good guy administrator. Anyway, so today, we thought that today we have three things to discuss. But the first thing we noticed at the end of last week was there were a lot of discussions about learning management systems and platforms and different ways to use them. And I thought it would be really exciting to really open up a discussion, an ongoing discussion where we start talking about different ways to use these platforms and exchanging ideas, but learning to use more, about the tools more. So I thought it would be great to invite David Tinapple today. David is an associate professor at Arizona State University. He is in digital culture, and he designed, along with Lauren Olson, David, jump in if I say anything wrong, a platform called CritViz, which came out of kind of a need to figure out how to teach a studio practice class to a large number of students in person. And David will explain more about it, but he came up with basically was like a hybrid solution. And I thought, since one of the ideas that we brought up last week really was this general idea of hybridity and flexibility, CritViz is a tool that was designed actually for an in-person class, but I've used it for 5 years in my online program, in the online program at ASU. And so I was really happy that he was willing to come talk a little bit about CritViz. And so I'm going to hand it over to David. Oh, one more thing that's very, very important to know is David has an MFA. He is an artist. He also knows all this computer programming stuff. He just happens to operate in both worlds, which I think make him exceptionally well suited to kind of address these issues. David, will you,
Thank you.
ready to go?
Yeah, I guess. I'm surprisingly nervous, but that's okay. So I know you wanted me to just talk about it for just like 15 minutes or so. So I'll try to go really fast. Okay. Yeah. I don't know if I'm able to share my screen, but there are just a few slides that I kind of thought might be helpful. Is that possible?
And can you share it from there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I guess I'll just share my entire screen. Oh, here we go. I can just do the slides. My computer is not liking the heat here. All right. Can you see my slides?
Yeah. Now I can.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah, so I'm David Tinapple. I do have an MFA, but I teach in a program that tries to combine sort of the engineering mindset with the creative media arts mindset. It's a school called Arts, Media, and Engineering at ASU. And we have an undergrad major called Digital Culture. And I was brought in, in 2008 or 9 to sort of build up the program. And it really got really big pretty fast. So I had some issues. I had some personal teaching problems with how big my classes got. So I don't know if you can see. I'm assuming you can see my slides. But so this is sort of what the MFA style critique was like as I was a student, and then later as I was a teacher in a small arts college. And so we're all pretty well accustomed to that. Sorry, I'm getting a beach ball on my computer here. I don't know if you can hear me still.
We can hear you.
Okay. I'm not sure it's liking the, oh, there we go. Okay. So even slightly bigger critiques are okay. They're fine. And we all know sort of why critique is good. It's a feedback system. I remember very fondly leaving critiques, long critiques where everyone would just go back to their studio and start working. So I really like that aspect of it. It makes you want to go back to work as opposed to an exam or a test or something. Kurowski, it's much more difficult to lie to a group. I like that quote. And then later on, as I started looking at critique more, and there's scientists are sort of into critique too. So Brian Henderson has this great paper where he says that knowledge construction, critique is an essential part of knowledge construction. Why the answer is wrong is just as important as why the right answer is right. But we all know that.
David?
So I got to ASU and this program started too. Yeah.
It's your audio is just a little crackly. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, that's for me too, and I'm not sure why. Let me just turn off the sharing. And
yeah, if you turn your video off, it might be better.
Okay. How do I? But I can't.
Just at the bottom, it says stop video.
Sorry, I'm not on Zoom screen.
There should be a little window that says stop video.
I don't even see any.
Will that stop his?
No, it wouldn't stop his share.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, I can turn off your video on this end.
Okay.
That might.
Does that help at all?
You're still a little crackly.
I can.
It's better though.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, it's better.
Much better.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, much better. Perfect.
Great.
And we can see your screen, so we're good.
Oh, great. Okay. So I got to ASU and suddenly I was faced with not classes quite this big, this sort of a famous picture, but classes that had too many students to have what I would consider a traditional critique, maybe 50 to 100 students. And I just had to either figure out how to teach in a totally different way, because I learned to teach the way I was taught, which was where the critique is the main sort of focus of the class. So I had to either figure out a different way to teach or try something different with technology. And teaching in a technology program, I thought maybe it would be interesting to try an experiment where we built a computer-supported critique system of some kind where maybe it would let me run what I would consider a traditional critique with 50 to 100 students. So we tried to build that. And at first we asked, how can we scale up a good critique? And that worked pretty well. And then we started asking, can a bigger class be bigger than a smaller class? I think there's still this very deeply ingrained idea that bigger is worse in any kind of teaching situation. But does that have to be true? There's plenty of situations where bigger is not worse in our world, right? Like social media, it always gets better as more people are on it because your network gets richer and there's more content, there's more points of view. So why is a bigger classroom always worse than a smaller one? So I don't know. That's just an interesting question. And then in 2020, this semester when we all had to suddenly start teaching online remotely, the questions I think are interesting are what's a blend between synchronous teaching and asynchronous teaching? I don't know, pseudo-synchronous teaching, something like that. So the interface for CritViz, it's a web-based based tool. So it's very simple, and we kind of whipped it together, so we didn't. It doesn't look like a very glitzy tool, but what it does is pretty neat. So Betsy's been.
I
using
actually
it for
like that about it. I like
Yeah.
the simplicity. I just have to say.
Yeah, thanks. So Betsy's been using it for a long time. We've done about 450. This started off as just like me and my partner, Lauren Olson, he's a great programmer. We started off just he and I using it, and then other people started using it because we didn't have any access controls for it. And one day we logged onto the database and there was like 15 classes using it, and we were very confused. So it started to get used by other people. So now we've had about 450 courses using it. About 4,000 total assignments have been given. We have about 50 courses per semester using it, and we've had about 10,000 students log in ever. And any given time, there's about 1,500 students using it. And then, so design choices, we had to figure out how to do, what does an online critique look like? How do we deal with anonymity? What's the role of anonymity? Reciprocity was a big question for us. So like, are students put into small groups, or are there clusters? What's the level of clusteredness? And then another question was ranking versus rating. This was a big, when you're trying to put something into numbers, these were the two obvious ways we could approach it. Do we want to do rank work against each other, or do we want to come up with some rubric-based sort of like rating system? And then how do you visualize those results? So this is the results of a critique in CritViz. It's very, very simple. These are all the responses down here. And then this is just sort of the top 20% of responses. And then these are the sort of rank averages. And I'll get to what the rank average means in a second. So, if you have a picture of it, this would be like the traditional structure of a large class. All the students here, and you have the teacher up front. And then, they make work, and it all goes to the instructor, and the so everything gets pretty clogged, because I think this is why large classes are typically not as good as smaller ones, is because, when you have it structured like this, the bottleneck is the attention of the instructor or instructors, and that just goes down steadily with more students in the class. So with CritViz, we tried to do something like this, where every student is given 5 pieces of work, and they're just randomly assigned. And they have to put those works into rank order, basically rank them first place, second place, third place, fourth place, fifth place. And what does that mean? That's up to the instructor on what criteria you want them to be ranked. That we just wanted to leave that open. And then so when every student is given 5 at random, and we have an algorithm that sort of just makes sure that everybody in a class like this, if you're asking every student to look at 5 things, you have to make sure the student isn't being randomly asked to look at their own work, and you have to make sure that all the pairings, all the groupings are done in a way that everybody does 5 things and everybody receives 5 things, and so that we have an algorithm that just balances that out. So in the end, we might get data that looks. This is just a spreadsheet data of a rather big critique, but the data would look something like this. And when you take the average of all the scores, so this person got a bunch of first place scores, and that means every critic who was looking at their work ranked, a lot of critics ranked them first place. One critic ranked them second place, one did fourth place. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but I'm pointing at the far left column here. And
I can see
then
it.
one person gave them a fifth place score. So, and, you know, while ranking is not perfect, it does a pretty good job of being flexible, easy to understand, and, you know, it does sort the work out pretty well. Maybe not as good as an instructor might do, but it, you know, the instructor is not involved in this. It's completely sort of student generated data. So if you look at the rank averages of that data, you'd see something like this. So you have a few really star performers and then just sort of a steady slope. And the shape of that slope can change, you know, based on the size of the class and the type of class. And then, you know, if you sort of combine this graph with this graph, you might get something that would look like that. That's where you see the critique scores expanding and contracting based on the rank average. So why build something like this? Yeah, so, you know, most classes, I think that you know, if you think about, if you want to change people's behavior, a good example is maybe like driving behavior. So, you know, if you want people to slow down on a road and drive and change their behavior in that way, you can do this, right? You can have a very expensive officer sit there and give tickets one by one, but this actually like doesn't change people's driving behavior on that road. It just becomes a revenue stream for the, you know, the officers to write tickets. But in general, it doesn't actually slow down the road at all. You know, you can do something like put up some really annoying speed bumps in that, you know, it slows people down, but it does a lot of damage to people's cars, and it's loud and ugly, and it doesn't work very well. So I think computer-supported critique would be something like this. These kinds of signs have been shown to actually change the behavior of drivers on the road significantly, and for a long time, for several miles after a sign like this. So what's going on here is the truck is being given real-time feedback and a normative reference at the same time. So the speed limit is 35 and this is your current speed. And that just does something to people's brains and makes them, and the result is changed behavior. So we built this tool, and I run critiques constantly on almost every assignment I do. Some surprises we got from it is that what I wasn't expecting. Giving feedback is actually, I think, more important and more impactful than receiving feedback, especially at the beginning. Students are not very good at giving criticism. So that what each student will read from their peers might not be super helpful, but the act of sitting down and giving feedback to peers, especially when you know the feedback is going to be visible and your name's going to be attached to it as a critic, and it's going to be open for everyone to read. Sitting down to do that makes you think about the deeper aspects of the assignment. What would constitute success on an assignment like this? You have to sort of process that and give some hopefully generous feedback to peers. And just sitting down and having to do that as part of the work, I think it changes the way the students approach the work. So, and I was surprised at how much students, we had to go through the whole IRB thing and make sure students could opt out. So even to this day, I still tell students that they can opt out of using CritViz in my class at any point. We can just revert to the traditional structure if they want to do it. But I've never had a student do that. They seem to really enjoy the social aspect of critique, even in a class of like, you know, 50 to 100 students. And I think students seem less anxious because they have a better sense of where they stand in relation to their peers. There's sort of less miscalibration. I feel like students try to game the system a little less. I found, especially with creative works, my students would sort of get to know my style really quickly and my tastes, and then they would just try to make work that they thought I would like. And I think there's less of that with critique because now they have an authentic audience. Their peers are all going to see their work, and they're going to see this sort of a leaderboard of the top 20%. We don't make every critique visible. You know, we don't give students this graph because there's no point in showing the last place student that they're the last place. I thought that was a little bit cruel. We very quickly realized that, as in like a few hours after turning on CritViz, we realized, oh, we can't show the last place students that they're last place. So we just decided to use just the top 20%. So there's this leaderboard, and students seem to really enjoy trying to impress their peers and get on the leaderboard. So And I think response rates went up. I don't have any empirical evidence of this. I could probably go back and try and figure it out. But I think just there's more participation in my classes, at least. And I think they just started to make better work. And then one of the bigger surprises for me was that my new favorite class size changed. So I used to have a favorite class size of like, 12, 15 students maybe. You can have a real critique in an hour and a half or 2 hours. You can look at everybody's work. That seems like a really nice, and you don't have to talk super loud. You can hear each other. But now my favorite class size is about 50. If I have less than 50 students, I feel like it's too small. There's not enough work being produced. There's not enough diversity in the work. And I really like 50 is my new sweet spot for teaching classes like that. So that's what am I missing, Betsy?
No.
Yeah, I mean,
You're not missing anything. It's great. I mean, I think
the most controversy, sort of like ranking versus rating, is a big topic to discuss, and anonymity, I think, are interesting topics too. So we chose ranking as our method of giving when students are looking at work, they're looking at 5 pieces of work, and you can set that number to whatever you want. But I like 5. I think that's a nice number. So if a student critic is sitting down to do an assignment, and it's a timed assignment with a deadline, they have 5 pieces of work, and the instructor has asked some questions in that critique that the student has to answer about each piece of work, and you can make those whatever you want. And you can make a type of question that's called a ranking question, and it just asks you to put the 5 works that you're looking at into some kind of rank order. And we chose ranking because it's about the relationship between the works and not necessarily about the works explicitly, the quality of the individual works, but how they relate to each other. And I felt that was, in a way, a little harder for the students and produces a little bit cleaner data when you have a big class and you're aggregating all that data. With rating systems, there's this sort of well-known Amazon problem that people generally give 1 stars or 5 stars on Amazon. That's kind of the way it works. And I wanted to avoid that problem. And I felt like students, if given a rating system, would probably go for somewhere between the 50% level and the 100% level, like almost all the time. They would just sort of rate everybody, maybe not all the way up, but not, they would. I think it's you're asking a lot of students to give feedback in the first place, but when it's numerical feedback of some kind, I think that can be really difficult and stressful. There's a lot of emotional baggage around grading, and they don't want to grade each other. I'm very careful to tell my students that they're not grading each other. We are collectively curating the work that got made so that we know where to put our attention. So in terms of sort of pseudo-synchronous, critiques will happen all online. Even in a class that I'm teaching in person, all the critique happens at home, when they're, in 24 hours or 48 hours after a deadline, they're assigned to do all these critiques, and they do it on their own time. And then that allows me to then walk into a big class of 50 students, pull up the results of the critique, and they've already sort of like pre-sorted it for me, and I can step through the work in the time allotted. I can probably look at 10 things. I can't look at 50 things. I could look at 5 or 10 things, but because they pre-sorted it, I can step through the work in the order that they've indicated would be a good order to look at things. So that's really helpful. I'm not just flailing, just randomly picking work. And I haven't looked at every piece of work yet. So because it's nice to do a critique as soon as possible after they've turned in the work. So usually I do a critique 24 hours after they have turned in the work. So it's really rapid. They haven't forgotten about their work yet, and they're eager still to hear people's feedback to it. So I don't know if I should turn my camera back on, but I don't want to take too much time.
No, it's great. It's helpful. I mean, David and I have had a lot of conversations about grading and different approaches. He's a little more data driven than I am, but I want to be clear too that this was a research project that he did. Not just a research project, but it's this is not a promotional to get you guys all to use it, but it's great. It's a great tool, but to really start thinking about ways in which, and not to also freak everyone out about having to teach large classes, but also different ways to thinking about.
Did he
What?
did he say his favorite number of students is 50? I feel like 65 people on this line all just like lied down and tried to take a nap after hearing that.
And I think it's largely about different ways of problem solving and going forward without being afraid. And but I also think some of the ways that these problems have been solved with this asynchronous critique, which and I use CritViz for smaller classes too. It functions a little bit differently. And anyway, David, you're still there, right?
Yes, I am. Yeah, I can't turn my video back on.
Okay.
That's not up to me right now.
Okay. So no, I appreciate you talking about this, and I just really appreciate how it presents different ways of thinking and a tool that you can that I hope people can think about using as a way to provide other approaching critique with a different thought process. One more thing, and then I think we're gonna move on. David, we had this conversation several years ago, and I've been using it ever since then. When you told me that you thought one of the most valuable thing about an art education was giving and receiving critical feedback, and for me, that has really informed the core of how I believe in art education. Is that anyway, so I just give you credit for that. So thank you for telling us, CritViz. I'm happy to answer more questions. If people want to email me about it, about using it. This is not an advertisement. This is another tool that you can look at. So
and we do have one question directed specifically at David, which is wondering what CritViz's bandwidth is. If everyone started using it tomorrow, would it crash? Would it handle that kind of volume?
Sorry, I had to turn off my video because I think it was causing the audio problems again. Yeah, so we did originally, when we had a single server, we were just, there was sort of some bandwidth problems. The bottleneck was the server, and when you have a deadline, it means that 50 or 100 students are trying to upload a video that's 100 megabytes all at the same time. And so since then, everything goes direct to Amazon Cloud Services. So there are no bottlenecks anymore. And occasionally, like at the beginning of the semester, it's not uncommon at ASU for the entire network to kind of freak out and nothing works. And I've had several times where that's happened, but CritViz is just working like totally smoothly because every student is just uploading their work and downloading work directly from the cloud server. So there are no bottlenecks. So yeah, we tried to sort out those problems, and there really are no problems with having, hundreds or more people using it at the same time. Yeah.
Thanks, David. All right.
Actually, I guess question to John and Betsy. Any more content before we want to open it up to questions generally? And David, will you be able to stay around for that?
I'd be happy to. Yeah, sure.
Great. Okay. Then maybe let's wrap up content for today so that we can get into the Q&A.
Oh, and if anybody wants to try it, I'd be more than happy. This is a pretty amazing looking group, and I think you guys look like you're all experts at teaching. So I don't know. I guess I don't know what that looks like, but it's just I'm getting that sense. So if anybody wants to try it, I'm more than happy. Yeah, it did start off as just purely a research project. We didn't have any intention of turning it into a bigger thing, but it kind of spread organically. So I'm happy about that.
I think the only thing that I had, Anne, was that we wanted to just encourage people to have students submit work to the FotoFika All-Stars.
Yes.
And I can do that in like 5 minutes here. One of the things that we've posted a few things about this, and I'm just going to share my screen for a second so you can kind of see where we are on it. But since we last met, we've gotten more than 75 people to submit. So there are students, MFAs and BFAs, and the site auto-populates. So as soon as your students upload an image, it it gets added to this, and it sets up at random. So you're constantly seeing a whole different list of people each time anybody looks at it. So if you have 2020 students that are BFAs, MFAs, BAs, BSs, PhDs, and AAs, we are welcoming them to submit an image. And one component of this, so these cards are based on the idea that in homage in some ways to Mike Mandel's original collection of photography cards. And he's involved in helping be one of the reviewers. And we've also been working with Becky Semp from CCP, and she has started to reach out to curators around the country and around the world. So we've got some confirmed ones that I'd like to list, and then we're adding more every day. So Russell Lord from New Orleans Museum of Art, Todd Tibetus from West Virginia University, David Chickadee, Ashlyn Davis, Ann Jastrub, Kate Albers, Susan Bright, Michelle Dunn, Kate Bassard, April Watson. So there's a big collection of people that are being added, and what they'll be doing is going through and writing a short, so each of the students' work has a 144 character statement that they've written, and the reviewers will be going through and writing statements about different artists that have been selected from this pile. So we're going to be doing that over the summer, but we need as many students to submit as possible so that we have a good collection. And then we're going to be printing an entire edition of the students' work as a set of baseball cards.
So
did I miss anything?
yeah.
May
Well-
30th. Please get your students to submit work by May 30th.
By May
Yeah.
30th. So, and I think on Facebook I posted, let me turn this off here. I posted that if you have 10 students that have submitted, I will send you a bag of coffee. And there are few people that have already done that. And if you're at a small school where that's impossible, then just buy, like, connect with another school and I'll figure out a way to send you all coffee. So just let me know that you've made 10 submissions some way, shape, or form, and I will send you coffee.
I promise we aren't pushing products here today. It's
I'm not, coffee's not for sale.
There was one more thing I just want to touch on, and that was the broader idea of going forward. And John made a post recently about self-care. So linking these ideas of going forward and what's next and what's going to happen this summer. And so I think look at John's post, and that will be subject, I think, for conversation in the upcoming weeks. Thinking inward a little bit, how we prepare for the summer, how we prepare for the fall. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that. But now we will step back and open it up for questions and answers.